to deliver this talk on the topic how IoT serves a critical role during COVID-19. As far as the agenda is concerned, what I initially want to do is to kind of give you an overview of what the business landscape is and how we have seen digital transformation being accelerated over the last few months. Share with you about some of the market trends that we're seeing from an IoT standpoint, and also share some use cases during the current pandemic. I'll also talk about how IoT will play a big role when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine, when it comes to storage and distribution. And then I would conclude. Just look at the business landscape today. Now we've seen the digital evolution play out over the last many years, right? And this transformation is not kind of confined to only certain cities or countries, but this is happening at a global level. All organizations have realized the importance of using digital. We also started to see the boundaries blur between physical and digital. We use the term called phygital now, right? A combination of physical and digital. And the pace at which this technology is changing is massive. It's a huge change. And these are powered by multiple trends that we're seeing play out in the market. Firstly, adoption of cloud. I think we've seen a lot of enterprises move some of their workloads from their on-prem environments to cloud environments. And this will continue going forward. Mobility, people would want to access any application from any device they want to. Software, as they say, is eating the world. So a lot of use of software. So we're using terms like software-defined networking, software-defined security, software-defined data centers. And this will perhaps get increased even further going forward. Security, of course, very, very important. When you have all of these assets connected to the internet, you need to protect these assets. So whether it is an endpoint security, whether it is network security or application and data security, security obviously becomes very, very important. And this is going to throw open a lot of job opportunities in the security space. We are in a data-powered world, right? So we are taking decisions based on data. And this is very, very critical. So use of analytics and AI, I think we're going to see a lot more adoption going forward. And finally, friends, IoT. So I'm going to touch upon IoT in a lot more detail as we get along through the presentation. Now, if you just look at the overall IoT market outlook, so we've seen a slow and steady growth. So there have been some sectors which have been great adopters of IoT, especially the last 6-7 months. There have been some which have paused IoT adoption for various reasons. So we're seeing a lot, more of a delay than a derailment. So any use cases which require business continuity, automation obviously will see a lot more adoption. And those which are more transformational in nature, a lot more growth oriented, will perhaps see investments coming in later. And we are seeing slowdowns on account of two issues. So one is consumer spend on discretionary items. That has come down. So whether it is smart homes or whether it is connected cars, these are definitely classified as discretionary. So these will perhaps happen a little later when the business outlook improves, when disposable incomes increase, perhaps a lot more adoption on that. On the enterprise side, we're going to see IoT being capital intensive, manpower intensive. So certain spends are going to be held up. So reallocation of capital on certain important projects will obviously take place. But when it comes to certain capital intensive IoT projects, that will get delayed. So anything that is going to drive automation, and we're seeing this happen because a lot of these small and medium enterprises who have not been adopting technology, and more specifically IoT, have seen the need to automate. And so low-cost automation, which is driven by IoT, that has picked up. Anything which is reducing the need for human support, that definitely will be a lot more demand. So, around remote operation of equipment, people who are on the field wanting to monitor equipment. So there we are seeing a lot of adoption of IoT. So anything supporting business continuity, something which is giving, cost savings, there the demand is much, much higher. So these are things that we are seeing play out in the market today. Now, where do organizations need to invest in IoT? I've kind of come up with three here. So those organizations, those who are part of industry that have seen a lot more accelerated demand. For example, we've seen online e-commerce companies. We've seen a huge demand, and they were not able to cater to that demand because of the supply challenges. But for them, IoT is definitely great for them to optimize their operations, to increase their production and decrease the time to market. Those who have seen a decline in revenue, especially the manufacturing sector, they definitely would need to invest to optimize their cost. I talked about automation, the need to have low cost automation, use of robotics and AGVs in factory environments, and the need to explore IoT based products and analytics. I think that is going to drive up revenue significantly. So a lot of the manufacturing companies today have a lot of data that is residing in silos. The need for them to have an integrated view of data and to leverage that data to be able to take decisions. I think that's going to be critical. And friends, the need to create a digital workplace in today's economy, and how do you empower the digital workers who are working remotely today, and also to prioritize worker safety, because as companies design their return to workplace strategies, and people are coming back to their factories, the need to use technology to be able to monitor their health in real time. And I'm going to talk about some use cases around this as we go forward. I just wanted to quickly share some very interesting use cases that we have seen, especially in India during the COVID situation. So here is one very interesting use case of a company in Kerala which has built a Carmi robo, a company called Asimov Robotics. And this is used in a hospital in Kerala. It's used for dispensing food and medicine, collecting the trash used by the patients, and also disinfecting the hospital. And this is completely IoT enabled. So it's got an IoT device in it with a cellular SIM that can connect to the internet, or it could also connect through Wi-Fi. And if there are patients who need to make a call to the doctor, it has also got a screen, which is currently not shown here, but it can make a video call between the doctor and the patient. So a great example of how one could leverage the power of IoT, especially in hospital environments where you do not want many of the people there to be exposed to patients. This was actually used in the hospital in Kerala, and this can actually be replicated across many other hospitals and cities. Another very good use case of how AI and IoT has helped in the COVID situation. This is an example of a ventilator that was built by a startup in Hyderabad. Now, ventilators were obviously very widely used, especially for those who had lower levels of oxygen. And this was an IoT-enabled ventilator that could be remotely monitored, where you can auto-adjust the oxygen flow. It had multiple functionalities. So one of them was you were able to trace contacts of a COVID-19 suspect, those who have visited the hospital over the last 2 weeks, then alerts to authorities, doctors and nurses, and even alerts to family members in case of emergency. And you could also do a remote monitoring of this ventilator, because this was IoT enabled, because you cannot always have the doctor be there and monitor this. So if you have the doctor away from the hospital, you could remote monitor this. And then most importantly, you could analyze all the data of the patients. And using the data, you can actually predict new outbreaks. And this is completely secured. So again, a great example of how using the power of IoT and using the power of analytics, one could build an IoT-enabled ventilator. This is an example of a company called BrainCorp, which makes autonomous robots. This is something which we were involved in. So these are widely used in many of the large retailers, where again, you want to reduce the dependence of people to do the scrubbing in a large retailer outlet. So you have these flow scrubbers which are used. Again, IoT enabled, you can remotely monitor this. And again, great use case where you could use not just in retail outlets, but even in hospitals. So these are completely autonomous. These robots are completely autonomous. I want to quickly shift to how during the COVID situation, because supply chain was very, very badly disrupted, how during the COVID times, use of technology for supply chain visibility and traceability. And we are very close to the vaccine being manufactured. So perhaps in a few months' time, we'll probably have the vaccine ready. And COVID during IoT will play a big role, especially during the storage and the distribution. I just wanted to share, some information here from and the sources from McKinsey. Now, the COVID-19 vaccine, which is going to be built, apparently has a need for 50 different raw materials. You're going to have a heavy test load on the raw materials, and quality control is going to be very, very difficult here. Secondly, the shelf life of the vaccine is going to be 18 to 36 months. And the storage, so the cold room storage is anywhere between 2 to -8 degrees, and it's going to be in actually frozen temperatures. And I also am given to understand that the vaccine actually would have to operate at -80 degrees centigrade, -80. So it's going to place a lot of emphasis on how do you manage the supply chain. So very tight supply chain control is needed for storage, and also for transportation, because these vaccines are very temperature and humidity sensitive, because any variations in temperature, any temperature excursions, it would lose its potency. So as a country, India as a country, we produce a lot of vaccine. In fact, Hyderabad is known as the vaccine capital of India because it produces more than 30% of the current vaccines that are used. And COVID situation will probably see a lot of vaccine being produced in Hyderabad, because a lot of manufacturing pharma companies here in Hyderabad who are actually making these, who are going to make these vaccines. A lot of trials going on right now, but a lot of the startups are actually involved, and the whole industry is actually getting geared up for this. So, for example, GMR Airport Authority, they are getting their cold dollies, which are large containers which are going to ship vaccine from the manufacturing setup to the airports. Companies like Blue Dart are getting geared up for this because their whole supply chain logistics is actually getting ready. So we're going to see a lot of IoT being used here, because the vaccine have to be at is temperature sensitive. So you want to have temperature sensitive temperature sensors which would be used. And then, of course, as it is moving from one point to the other, you want to monitor the temperature in real time. You want to monitor the vehicles, where are they going. So again, use of IoT here. So the whole transport control will be really tight, and IoT will play a really very big part in this. Very quickly, moving on to other use cases where you could use IoT and video and data analytics for people safety. And I'm going to highlight a few use cases here. So you're going to use IoT, of course, sensors that will collect data, and then you move all the data to cloud to cellular. But it's a combination of this, sensorization and analytics. I think that will play a really big part, not just now, but even going forward as people come back to work. And I'm going to share very quickly some use cases. So let's start with the thermal analytics use case. So here you could have these IoT-enabled IR guns, which will measure the temperature as one gets into the office. In fact, I know of a lot of startups who are making solutions where you could actually integrate an IR gun into an existing metal detector, so that someone who's passing through that metal detector, you can actually check his temperature in real time. And those whose temperature is normal would be allowed in, and there's a big screen there which will be showing a green once a person's temperature is normal. Someone's temperature is more than normal, would then the screen would have a red display, so then he would be isolated. So you're going to use a combination of this. So you're going to use IR guns not just in public places, but even in companies where you have people coming back to offices. And so the need for not just IoT, but even analytics, because with all the data that you're gathering, you can get a lot of analytics in terms of how many people have come in, how many people's temperature were higher, how many were normal, and all that. Secondly, we are also seeing use cases around people counting and occupancy. So, real-time count of people entering and exiting. Again, you're using your traditional existing CCTV cameras. A camera, nothing but a video sensor. So you're going to monitor for compliance with occupancy guidelines. You're going to help with the operations and design. So again, a great use case where you can see, people counting and occupancy. Queue management and wait time, again, in public places, perhaps you're going to see this happen. We are going to get a real-time count of people waiting in the queue. You're going to leverage the existing CCTV cameras. And again, the use of IoT here to be able to do this in real time. social distancing and monitoring, I think this is already being used. So I know of a startup whom I work very closely with. They've actually built kind of a badge that an employee would carry, and that's a Bluetooth enabled badge. So if you're getting into the office, and if you're, say, less than 6 feet away from somebody else who would also be wearing the badge, the badge actually vibrates, and it gives you an indication that, hey, you're not maintaining social distancing guidelines. So here you could use the same technology. Again, these are IoT enabled, because the Bluetooth badge, again, through a network, it sends it to the server, and then you can get all kinds of analytics. So you can measure the count of people within spaces, within an office, in a lobby or a dining room. You can measure the physical distance between visitors and between employees. And then, of course, you get all these dashboards and alerts when social distancing requirements are not met. So you can get all these kind of analytics using IoT. Object detection for PP. So again, as people get back to offices, as people go into many of these malls and other public places, of course, it is mandatory now in some countries for people to wear masks. But in case people are not wearing masks, or wherever gloves are mandatory, then again, you can leverage the CCTV cameras to monitor for that, and alerts can be sent in case people are not complying with these guidelines. Again, a great use case where you can combine IoT with video intelligence. So in conclusion, I just want to say that there are enough drivers now for companies to adopt IoT, because what we've seen happen is that the cost of sensors have come down significantly, the IoT devices have come down significantly, the cost of that has come down significantly, and there's a lot of emphasis on making devices here. So we're going to see a lot more reduction in the cost of devices, because that has always been a challenge in terms of making sure that the device cost is very low. Secondly, the cost of connectivity has come down, and this will come down even further. And the options for connectivity are even more. Unlike earlier, where you had very limited options for connectivity, today you have cellular options. Again, within cellular, you have 3G, 4G today, and in the future you're going to have 5G. Satellite is one great example of using satellite connectivity for IoT use cases. Again, low power WAN connectivity. You must have heard of terms like narrowband IoT, LTE-M. So these would be deployed very soon for applications where you really don't need very high bandwidth applications. But the amount of data that you're sending to the cloud is very low. So a lot more options for connectivity. You could even use unlicensed spectrum like LoRa and Sigfox. You're also going to see a lot of use cases for edge, where you want an IoT device to capture data where the asset is located. So if the asset is generating data, you want the IoT device to be as close as possible to where the asset is, and so that you can actually respond to the alerts in real time. So we're going to see a lot more of these emerging. So it's always going to be a trade-off, because the moment you have an edge device, you need a lot more compute and storage. That increases the device cost. But then when you have the edge solution, you won't be transmitting data to the cloud, or you're going to send very little data to the cloud. So your cost of connectivity will be low, and the cost of cloud will also be much lower. And finally, friends, I just want to end by saying that it is the combinatorial impact of multiple digital technologies working in tandem that will ensure that the maximum value can be derived to get your better business outcomes. So it's always important that you start with IoT, of course, to gather data, but then you need to combine it with analytics, and at one point in time get to AI, because you want to predict outcomes. And then you can add additional technologies like blockchain, AR, VR. So it's when you combine these multiple technologies that work in tandem, that's when organizations can get better business outcomes. So with that, I would end my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Sneel. It was a great presentation. Any question from the audience, please? If no questions, then I would like to thank Mr. Sneel for his precious time, and it was a great presentation. We'll provide you a recorded copy shortly. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Hafiz. Thank you so much. Bye.